do want to touch on before we move on to the offensive and defensive line is this running back room. Obviously, you have Jashaun Corbin, who's entering the NFL draft. He's not going to be on this team next year. But Treshaun Ward, we talked about this a little bit last show. He's kind of that running back one, or you assume he's that running back one. But when you look at this rushing offense overall, what do you think it's going to be like compared to even last year where we saw so many guys get different opportunities? How do you think this room is going to break out?
I think it's going to be very similar. There's a few guys that are really shifty, like just getting that one little crease and taking it to the distance. And then you have some guys that are just bowling balls like Benson and DJ Williams and CJ Campbell. So I think that you're going to see like basically what it was last year, just explosive runs. And I think we're going to improve on the harder hitting runs, like pushing around people type deal.
So you think they should be improved on the goal line then? I guess that's what – yeah.
I think so from what I've seen so far.
I agree with that. And I think to me part of that is – and we'll get into some PFF rankings later, but I think this team actually ranked last out of the ACC in run blocking. Their run block rate was just god-awful. There's no other way to get around it. So I think – this running back room should be aided by an improved offensive line and hopefully more consistency at that position.
Because you mentioned blocking has been good so far.
Right. It has been. I think, we had Robert Scott do player interviews yesterday. He talked about this specifically, how, last season when they would finish practice or, when they'd go into the meeting room with Coach Atkins, he'd bring up negative plays first. He'd bring up plays you need to improve on, and then he would bring up the positive ones. And Robert Scott said after practice yesterday that we're seeing a lot more of those positive plays this year and a lot less of those negative plays. And I think while the interior of the defensive line has been really getting after this offensive line, that room should be improved. It should help this team be better. And I think just looking at some of the guys that you touched on, DJ Williams to me is going to be one of those guys too, who's going to get involved in this running game. And, I think you nailed it. What we saw last year, I think is going to be very similar to what we see for this rushing offense again. And we see Mike Norvell's level of success with running back. So I think, the running game should be improved by the offensive line. But I also think they have diverse running backs who can do all kinds of different things, who, depending on game situation, game flow, the opponent, they should be able to throw all kinds of different guys.
I think there's going to be a lot more passes to the running backs as well because they've been consistently catching the ball. We're lined up.
And I would say kind of like all those guys at the top of that depth chart really do look comfortable as pass catchers. I think that's something pretty consistent that we've seen all throughout camp.